Enter the team of Sheldon Solomon, Tom Puzinski, and Jeff Greenberg. For the last 20 years, this trio and their colleagues have been conducting empirical laboratory experiments to substantiate the claims of Ernest Becker about the effects of death denial. They've conducted over 150 studies in support of what they call terror management theory. These groundbreaking studies display that when reminded of death, test subjects do indeed react aggressively towards those who are different, and positively towards those who are similar.
In a sense, we're many gods.
In the early 1980s, when we started speaking in public about Becker's ideas, some folks were intrigued, some folks were horrified. You're an assemblage of blood and guts and organs that, should a knife impact upon your belly at an unfortunate angle, would spill out on the pavement, just like you see those squashed animals on the side of the road. But what most people said is, look, we don't know what to do with these ideas. It's like poetry. It may be interesting, but there's no way that you can actually test them. And this is where our training as experimental social psychologists was actually put to good use.
Terror management theory came out of the writings of Ernest Becker. His writings answered some questions that we had been asking in our own work. And we were social psychologists, and we're very focused on empirical research.
What we said is, well, okay, let's try and think about ways of taking all of these ideas and let's really boil them down into some basic statements about the nature of reality that we could then use to generate hypotheses and go out and actually test.
The first component of terror management theory states that individuals need to sustain faith in a meaningful worldview. The second component states that individuals need to feel as though they are valued, protected members, objects of significance within this worldview. Psychologists would generally call this self-esteem.
And if we can sustain these two psychological constructs, then we can function relatively securely in the world. And if these constructs are threatened, then we're going to feel anxiety and have a need to defend those constructs.
So we developed what we call the mortality salience hypothesis. And all that says is, look, if culture serves a death-denying function, then if you remind people that they're going to die, that should momentarily really increase the need for the death-denying aspects of their particular beliefs about reality. And that should be reflected by their reactions to other individuals who either bolster or support those beliefs, or who undermine those beliefs by either being hostile to them or merely different from them. The very first study that we did was with municipal court judges in Tucson, Arizona.
Judges have a kind of a clear set of values that are part of their worldview, and that is to uphold the law. And so what we thought is that if we make some judges think about their own death, they should become more punitive toward a lawbreaker. So half the judges, on a random basis, were given questionnaires that asked them about their own death. Half were not given such a questionnaire.
And then we had them actually look at an actual court case. The most common case in municipal court in Tucson is solicitation of prostitution.
They were simply asked to recommend a bond for the prostitute. Okay? What we found is the judges who were reminded of their own death before setting bond for the alleged prostitute recommended a bond of $455. The control judges, who were not reminded of their own death, set a bond, an average bond, of $50.
In another study, Christian test subjects were asked to complete a questionnaire intended to determine how people form impressions of others. What the subjects didn't realize is that the researchers were actually making determinations about them. Embedded within some questionnaires were questions specifically formulated to make the reader think about his or her own death. The students were then asked to give their impressions of two fictitious individuals who on paper shared similar personality traits but differed in religious affiliation.
And the hypothesis was that after the Christian subjects thought about their own death, they should be especially positive in their reactions to a fellow Christian student and especially negative toward a Jewish student. And that's exactly what we found.
The students who did not receive death reminders showed no preference in their evaluations. These results were important indicators that attitudes towards others change when one is confronted with one's own death. However, the results did not speak to behavioral changes.
And so one example of a study that we've done to test this idea was a study in which we wanted to see if reminding people of their own death would make them more reluctant to use cultural symbols or icons in inappropriate ways.
For this study, subjects were asked to participate in what they were told were research experiments designed to explore both personality and creative problem solving. Once again, subjects completed personality questionnaires, some of which contained death reminders.
When they're done with that, they come out, then we describe the two tasks for them, and their job is to try to complete the tasks.
The first task required subjects to sift sand from a jar also containing water and black dye. Various items were available to help complete this task.
We set it up so that the only object they could use to successfully achieve the goal of sifting the sand out was a little American flag. And so what they would have to do is secure the American flag with a rubber band on an empty jar and then pour the black dye through the American flag, which of course ruins the American flag.
For the second task, subjects were asked to hang a crucifix on the study room wall. Again, various items were available to help them do so.
In order to do that, the only object they could use to successfully hammer the nail into the wall so they can hang up the crucifix was the crucifix itself.
Those students who had received death reminders tried more alternative ways to complete their tasks. They were more apprehensive to desecrate their most cherished cultural icons and took twice as long as those who were not reminded of their death prior to the experiment. Now that the terror management team had established that changes in behavior occurred when people thought about their own death, they were prepared to conduct what was to become their most striking and ominous study. If it could be determined that thinking of death caused behavior patterns to change, could it not also be determined that these behaviors might in fact be aggressive toward other individuals?
The problem with measuring any type of aggressive behavior in a laboratory situation is the ethical concerns that it brings up. We can't exactly have people punching one another, hitting, shooting, stabbing. That's frowned on ethically. So what we did was we devised a measure where we could safely assess intent to harm another person. And we did that by using hot sauce.
You know, Becker argued, and we got into this partly because we thought this can help explain real-world prejudice and aggression against different others. But it was inspired by real incidents in which people have used hot sauce to physically attack other people. There was a case where a cook was angry at police and spiked a couple of cops' food with hot sauce. More significant and less humorous, there are numerous cases in which parents have used hot sauce to punish their children, which is a form of child abuse. But in the lab, what we thought we might be able to do is at least get some indication of an intention to hurt someone else simply because you've been reminded of your own death and they're threatening an aspect of your worldview. In this paradigm, the subjects come in and they're told that the study concerns personality and food preferences.
Subjects were once again given a set of supposed personality questionnaires. Some included the death reminder and others did not. Then, in what subjects were told was an unrelated study, they were asked to allot a variable amount of extremely hot sauce for a participant of dissimilar political background to taste and rate. Those who had received death reminders prescribed more than twice the amount of hot sauce as those who did not receive the death reminders. This has profound implications. These studies show that reminders of death play an influential role in the human psyche and can inspire us to act aggressively. While hot sauce itself might seem benign, the implications of these studies are frightening. What happens when the means of aggression is not hot sauce, but rather a gun or another weapon? And what might be the result if the issue at hand was whether or not to provide food aid to a starving country? Would we act differently if their culture posed a threat to our psychological equanimity? Many people function day to day seemingly oblivious to the effect death has upon them. Most would claim that they don't think about death at all. The industrial world has sterilized itself to the point where we hear about death, but rarely see it firsthand. But does this mean that we are immune to the effects of death?
When a lot of people hear about this theory for the first time, the initial reaction is, you know, I don't think about death all that much. And if I don't think about death all that much, how could death be playing such an important role in our lives?
How could it be affecting me in these powerful ways, or how could it affect ongoing behavior when I almost never think about death? People do think about death and are reminded of death quite commonly. Any major city newspaper's got a murder story pretty much every day. If you watch the news, if you watch television, you see stories of murder and death pretty consistently. So reminders of death are actually quite common. The other point is that we do agree that we don't think about death all that much consciously in our daily lives.
You know, the essence of Freud's ideas about the nature of the psychological apparatus is that most psychological activity is quite unconscious.
We repress our concerns about death and our thoughts of death, but it's underneath. It's outside of consciousness. Now, how do you get at that? That sounds like, you know, this is sort of untestable. It's not untestable. Psychologists have recently developed technology to present material to people without their awareness that they're being exposed to the material. And we call this subliminal priming.
Utilizing this method, the terror management team, spearheaded by Jamie Arndt at the University of Missouri at Columbia, developed what they call the subliminal death prime.
We had folks come and stare at a computer screen and do what they call a lexical decision task. It's just words are flashed on a screen, and people are supposed to look at them and push a button if they're similar. So if you see like shoes and pants, those are similar items. And if you see like taco and sneaker, those are dissimilar items. But really, that's just an excuse to get them to look at the screen, because in between those words, very rapidly at like 21 milliseconds, are either flashed the word death or the word field, because those words have the same number of letters and the same frequency of occurrence in the English language. And in fact, when you do that, nobody knows that it's happened. That's what makes these studies amazing. If we show people afterwards, if we say, hey, we flashed some stuff that you couldn't see, here's 4 words, can you tell us which one was flashed? People cannot pick out the one that they've seen reliably. So we know that it's quite, quote, unconscious, and yet they show the same hostility towards someone who is different than themselves, and the same affection towards someone who's similar when we ask them to explicitly ponder their own demise.
Many cultures have different methods for dealing with and examining death. Exploring death denial offers just one example, but it is applicable cross-culturally. These results have been replicated in tests throughout the world, implying that fear of death is most likely a universal influence, regardless of the specifics of various cultures or customs.
I think these ideas about death and symbolic immortality, about denial of death in Becker's work, extend cross-culturally. They're all primal ideas, and all primal human experiences are universal.
World events can sometimes serve as a window, through which we can confirm the veracity of these ideas.
Today, our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts.
I saw the first tower kind of smoking, and I saw the second plane maneuver around behind and hit the second tower.
Holy fuck! Oh my God! Oh my God!
My first reaction, I think like a lot of people, was this, what is this? This can't be real. When I got past that this is actually happening, my first response was anger. I was angry. I'm a New Yorker. I'm from New York.
I did think of Pearl Harbor, and but I thought that we had denial of death in the sky over Manhattan.
There's no question that what's happening there is a clash of worldviews.
I think that what we've seen in response to those attacks is a lot of anxiety and a lot of anger. First of all, it reminds us of our mortality. We keep that buried day to day in the symbolic system, and this kind of brought it to the fore. The other threat is a threat to our culture. Okay, that what allows us to, walk around day to day feeling okay is that we're Americans and we're part of this strong, powerful, and good nation. And that's a big part of what protects us from our mortality concerns. And now that's being threatened, okay, by not only killing a lot of Americans, but attacking major symbols of our culture, Pentagon, World Trade Center, obviously on purpose.
The events of September 11th, 2001 reminded millions of people of their mortality in very direct ways. In the span of only a few hours, the cultural worldview collectively maintained by the United States was agonizingly damaged. The ripple effect spread throughout the world.
I'm tired and I'm wasted, and everything reminds me I don't have control of what I don't know, and the sounds of the city around me are drowning. I don't have control of what I don't know.
Just like a terror management theory experiment carried out on an enormous scale, all the conditions were in place for the subjects to first reinforce their shared cultural worldview. In the United States, examples of this became quickly apparent.
Our country is strong. A great people has been moved to defend a great nation. Terrorist attacks can shake the foundations of our biggest buildings, but they cannot touch the foundation of America.
I'm just going out here to support my country and let everybody know this is one nation under God.
How long you been out here?
Since the planes crashed into the World Trade Center Tuesday.
We show our strength, right? We buy American flags. American flags are off the racks. Also, you see Christians and religious people are turning to their religion.
As terror management theory would have predicted in a laboratory setting, what was to follow would be an aggressive reaction against the threatening other.
I think we should go over there and kick ass and take names later.
Near Tucson, we saw a man killed because he was wearing a turban. And in fact, he was from India and he was a Sikh. He had absolutely nothing to do with this. Some angry American killed him. And it's frustrating, right? Because you can't find Osama bin Laden. He's been vilified, he is the evil, he's who we want to get retribution from, but he's hard to get at. So you see the scapegoating and the overgeneralization.
That urge for revenge, that urge to be protected and call on our superior forces to, you know, go and annihilate and so forth, those are very strong emotions, and I don't think we should discount them. But it doesn't mean that that should be the basis on which we act.